Panera now delivers, so you can order good, clean food right to your office, or door, or porch, or backyard, or front yard, or apartment, or dorm, or castle, or shop, or worksite, or wherever. For lunch, dinner, and everywhere in between. Click the banner to order or visit PaneraBread.com. Participating locations only. Panera. Food as it should be.
Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Garrity.
And welcome, everyone, to the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, along with Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We have good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today. We're also brought to you today by ZipRecruiter. Right now, Three Martini Lunch listeners can post jobs to ZipRecruiter for free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/free trial. More on ZipRecruiter and the good work they do a little bit later in the podcast. Jim, I was on my way home yesterday. It was getting to be around, 5:30, 6 o'clock, and I'm starting to get that itchy feeling because no major news had dropped like it usually does around that time the last few days. But lo and behold, Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, has come through with big news, and it is news that is actually being widely received pretty well in Washington, D.C., and that is that he is appointing a special counsel to look into the issue of Russia and their interference in the 2016 presidential campaign. Here is part of his statement. In my capacity as acting attorney general, I determined that it is in the public interest for me to exercise my authority and appoint a special counsel to assume responsibility for this matter. My decision is not a finding that crimes have been committed or that any prosecution is warranted. I have made no such determination. What I have determined is that based upon the unique circumstances, the public interest requires me to place this investigation under the authority of a person who exercises a degree of independence from the normal chain of command. The choice for leading this investigation is former FBI Director Robert Mueller, nominated first by President Bush in 2001, just days before 9/11. He served out a full 10-year term, and then President Obama had him stay on for a couple more years. And then when he retired, that's when we got Jim Comey. So, Jim, for the most part, we're seeing good reviews on the decision from Republicans and Democrats. We're also seeing very good reviews on the choice of Mueller. There are, of course, folks who don't like this, the White House being one of them. Their reaction has ranged from, hey, this is great, we can wrap this up quickly, to this is the biggest witch hunt in political history. You also have folks like Dick Morris suggesting that Rosenstein has, quote, killed this administration's ability to function, no health care overhaul, no tax cuts, no government reform, all while we wait for results of an investigation into what he calls a nothing scandal. So, Jim, the immediate silver lining here is that I no longer have to hear Chuck Schumer or Dick Blumenthal or all these other irritating libs demanding that this be done. But overall, what do you make of Rosenstein making this decision and Mueller taking the job?
Do you get the feeling, Greg, that around 5:58 in the evening yesterday at the Department of Justice, the Deputy Attorney General was there saying, wait for it, wait for it, and now launch the bombshell. And that's, obviously everybody's about halfway out the door, about ready to turn off the computer, all that stuff, but all of a sudden, bzzz, your phone blows up. All of a sudden, oh my goodness, have you seen this? I think this is exactly what the country needed. Chalk me up as one of those guys who's been a Trump critic for a long time, but doesn't believe he's at the heart of a vast Russian conspiracy, and is extraordinarily skeptical that the president himself, at least, violated any laws or did something inappropriate during the course of the 2016 campaign involving Russia. Now, is it possible he's got some investments with Russia he's not eager to share or disclose? Yeah, I suppose. Is he certainly didn't mind the benefits of the Russians doing what they did during the 2016 campaign. But I just don't buy this whole idea that this is going to lead to Trump and it's going to lead to impeachment and that, as Peter Dow and Sally Cohn and all these other people seem to think, and then Hillary gets to be president because 2016 was unfair, just doesn't work that way, folks. But my suspicion is that, you look at some of these other figures, Carter Page, Roger Stone, did any of them do anything illegal or something like that? I suppose it's plausible. And I think if they did, a guy like Robert Mueller is exactly the kind of guy who's going to go, get to the bottom of it. He's not going to give anybody a free pass because he likes them or because he thinks they're on the right side politically. But I also, despite the president's tweets, I don't think he's going to launch a witch hunt. I don't think he's going to be embarrassed to come back with nothing and just indict somebody for the sake of indicting somebody. I think this is a guy who, understands the country needs answers and will try to give them those answers sooner rather than later. And we can finally decide, look, if this leads back to Trump, then there will be severe consequences. If there aren't, then Trump deserves the right to go on with his presidency like a normal president, or as normal president as he can be. That this is this cloud hanging over his presidency that a lot of Democrats, a lot of people who didn't want to see Trump elected have said, because of this, he's not really president. Yes, he was sworn in, but we don't have to recognize him as president. We don't have to treat him as president. It's not really a legitimate presidency. And that's a nonsensical argument based on what we know now. Even if it does, you don't get to undo the election and make Hillary president or anything like that. So hopefully Mueller will get to the bottom of this. He'll give us clear answers. If anybody committed crimes, they will be indicted and prosecuted, assuming, of course, Greg, that Trump doesn't pardon everyone. One way or another, I would like to see the country get past this. And as somebody who is not a particularly big fan, I'm not attached to any particular outcome other than to see justice done. And hopefully that will happen, and the country will be in a better shape because of it.
Well, let's move on to the second Martini, because as this investigation goes forward, you mentioned a couple of the names that could be associated with it. And certainly retired General Michael Flynn is part of that, the former national security advisor. The New York Times is shedding some new light on the situation involving Flynn from the time of the transition, which is making this even more of a head-scratcher, Jim, as we talk about our bad Martini here. This is the New York Times. Michael T. Flynn told President Trump's transition team weeks before the inauguration that he was under federal investigation for secretly working as a paid lobbyist for Turkey during the campaign, according to two people familiar with the case. Despite this warning, which came about a month after the Justice Department notified Mr. Flynn of the inquiry, Mr. Trump made Mr. Flynn his national security advisor. The job gave Mr. Flynn access to the president and nearly every secret held by American intelligence agencies. Mr. Flynn's disclosure on January 4th was first made to the transition team's chief lawyer, Donald F. McGahn, who is now White House counsel. That conversation and another one 2 days later between Mr. Flynn's lawyer and transition lawyers shows that the Trump team knew about the investigation of Mr. Flynn far earlier than has been previously reported. So, Jim, we always had questions about the hiring of Flynn. We know Trump's loyal to Flynn, and that certainly was true up until at least February 14th and probably since then. What do you make of the Trump team getting this information and going forward with Flynn anyway?
It's funny you mentioned loyalty, Greg, because that's the response I've gotten on Twitter to what I wrote in the Morning Jolt this morning, which was that, look, first of all, Flynn should have said to Trump, Flynn should have, the moment Flynn was asked or it kind of found himself in the role of being the campaign national security advisor to then candidate Trump, the right thing for Flynn to do would be, okay, I have to cancel this contract with this Turkish-owned company. I guess it's a Dutch company with a Turkish owner that was very closely tied to the Turkish government, and they wanted them to promote the interest of the Turkish government in dealing with this exiled figure in Pennsylvania. Flynn should have had the good judgment to recognize, this is a conflict of interest. I can't be working for, getting money from foreign entities and advising U.S. presidential candidate at the same time. I got to cancel the contract. Once he didn't do that, and he continued to be Trump's advisor and apparently was writing op-eds and continuing to push the line that the Turkish government wanted to see, he had to recognize this kind of takes him out of the running for any role where he's setting U.S. policy again. But he didn't. He apparently was very interested. And when Trump said, asked, he said, yes, I'd like to do this. He should have said no. He should have recognized he was creating a problem for Trump, that he was not serving the president or the country well by having this hanging over him. Failing that, someone around Trump, including these White House counsel figures, these lawyers should have said, Mr. President, if you hire this guy to be your national security advisor, this is going to come back to bite you in the tush. This is going to come back to be a problem. He is under investigation for a conflict of interest. He was collecting money from a foreign government. You can't be national security advisor if you have something like that hanging over your head. And Trump needed to listen. Now, I assume those lawyers at least expressed some of these concerns, and it sounds like Trump kind of, whatever they said, it was not enough to persuade Trump. It's deeply frustrating the president did not grasp what this was. And I keep getting people saying, oh, no, it's just Trump being loyal to a guy who was loyal to him. Well, I guess the real question is, was Flynn really all that loyal to Trump? Right? If he was, he would have dropped the Turkish contract, but he didn't. So, Trump is being harmed by Flynn. And for whatever reason, Trump refuses to see that. Now, we talked a few weeks ago about this talk that apparently Trump really wants to talk to Flynn sometime soon. presumably not to coordinate testimony in any further investigation, but simply because he thinks Flynn is such a good guy. This is not wise. This is exposing the president to legal liabilities and problems down the road. And, you got to feel for White House staff, because I'm pretty sure there are some people in that building who understood the danger of Flynn and what he represented, but the president just would not listen.
Yeah. And there was a story just in the last couple of days, Jim, about how Flynn, this was before the Trump administration took office, convinced Susan Rice, who was the outgoing national security advisor, to hold off on an operation going after ISIS because Kurds were prominently factored and the Turkish government didn't want that. And so was that the reason why Flynn decided he didn't want to give the green light to that? Did he want the Trump administration to make the decision? We don't know, but just the fact that he had that previous connection raises flags that you don't need.
Maybe he makes that decision completely on the merits, but when you've collected a large amount of money from a foreign interest, your decisions are always going to be called into question like that.
Yeah.
Ideally, you want a national security advisor who has none of those sorts of issues, who is always seen as giving his best judgment and has not been influenced by any past work with a foreign government or foreign entity.
One of the nice things you can do when you hire someone, because you can set up the parameters, is have a box. Are you currently under federal investigation for any potential crimes? The Trump transition team apparently decided not to go that route, but you can.
They knew. They just didn't care.
But you can screen for that, too, is what I'm saying here. And so the question is, are you hiring? Do you know where to post your job to find the best candidates? Because with ZipRecruiter, you can post your job to 100-plus job sites with just one click.
Their powerful technology efficiently matches the right people to your job better than anyone else. And you can figure out if the person is under federal investigation. This is why ZipRecruiter is different. Unlike other job sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them. In fact, more than 80% of jobs posted on ZipRecruiter get a qualified candidate in just 24 hours. No more juggling emails or calls to your office. You simply screen, rate, and manage the candidates all in one place with ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use dashboard.
Oh, man, I totally agree about the calls to the office. That drives me crazy. When I see the number, but I don't recognize the number, so I pick it up, and then it's some PR person, or maybe it's a job seeker, whatever it is, you immediately regret answering the phone, and you just wish your voicemail had taken it. You don't have that to worry. You don't have to worry about that anymore with ZipRecruiter. So find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by businesses of all sizes to find the most qualified job candidates with immediate results. And right now, listeners to 3 Martini Lunch can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/free trial. That's ZipRecruiter.com/free trial. One more time to try it for free. Get that tab open right now. Go to ZipRecruiter.com/free trial. All right, Jim, on to the crazy Martini now. And this was the source for a minor civil skirmish over at National Review yesterday with one of your contributing writers, Ross Douthat, who also writes for the New York Times, suggesting that it's time for the cabinet and the Congress to consider invoking the 25th Amendment against Donald Trump. And that led to response pieces at National Review Online, and those are still up, and I encourage folks to go there. Jim, this is the crazy Martini for a number of reasons, but I believe that Ross Douthat, while a very respectable writer and worth reading most of the time, has committed one of the classic blunders. The first, of course, is never get involved in a land war in Asia. The second is never go up against a Sicilian when death is on the line. And number 3, never, ever make a case to conservatives for what you want to do by quoting David Brooks. That is just wrong.
If you look closely at the pant crease, you can see.
So basically what happens here, he talks about how Brooks, writing on Tuesday, talked about Trump having a basic childishness, and that's the simplest way of understanding what has come tumbling into light in the last few days. The presidency now has king-like qualities, and we have a child on the throne. He goes on to say, a child cannot be president. I love my children. They cannot have the nuclear codes. But then he says, but a child also cannot really commit high crimes and misdemeanors in any usual meaning of the term. There will be more talk of impeachment now, more talk of a special prosecutor for the Russia business. Well and good. But ultimately, I do not believe that our president sufficiently understands the nature of the office that he holds, the nature of the legal constraints that are supposed to bind him, perhaps even the nature of normal human interactions to be guilty of obstruction of justice in the Nixonian or even Clintonian sense of the phrase. I do not believe he is really capable of the behind-the-scenes conspiring that the darker Russia theories envision, and it is hard to betray an oath of office whose obligations you evince no sign of really understanding or respecting, which is not an argument for allowing him to occupy that office. It is an argument, he says, instead for using a constitutional mechanism more appropriate to this strange situation than impeachment, the 25th Amendment to the Constitution, which allows for the removal of the president if the vice president and a majority of the cabinet informs the Congress that he is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, and a two-thirds vote of Congress confirms the cabinet's judgment. And he admits that this would not apply under the circumstances envisioned by the framers of the 25th Amendment. Jim, as Ian Tuttle and others have pointed out, something like this would be a direct assault on the will of the people as expressed at the ballot box back in November. Obviously, people knew what they were getting with Donald Trump. 60-plus million people loved him or liked him better than Hillary Clinton. There's tens of millions also who can't stand him, but nobody can argue that he's not what they expected.
This is how you know Ross has really stepped in it, when I have to give a really full-throated defense of Donald Trump. Look, first of all, let's go back to what this amendment is. And I think that obviously, if God forbid, one day Donald Trump wakes up and starts saying that his dog is talking to him and that he sees flying saucers and he's, sounding like he's, on LSD or something like that, then yes, the president is not of sound mind, and he can be removed from office. I think also I'm going to go slightly different in our film catalog, Greg, and I'm just going to think back to Air Force One, starring Harrison Ford, which was an interesting kind of subplot in which they're debating about, is the president still the president if he's been taken hostage? Does he still have the powers of the presidency? Or can they invoke that amendment to say, look, you're not in a position where you can make rational decisions anymore. Your life is being threatened. Even if you are escaping and John McClaning your way through Air Force One, you're not the president anymore. The vice president is empowered to make decisions. Also, this played in just about every season of 24 at one point or another. Basically, all it would take David Palmer sneezing, and his vice president was ready to hold a coup and take over. Right now, look, is Donald Trump acting the way I or many other Americans would like him to? No, but that's not the standard. Is he crazy? You can make air quotes and say, is he acting, unpredictable and impulsive and some would say, unprofessional or beneath the presidency? Sure, but not in a way that makes you say, oh, this guy cannot execute his duties. He is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. He is not of sound mind. Nothing yet. I'm not saying that, everything Trump does makes perfect sense. I'm just saying that you can't, there's nothing that's happened. And here's what Charlie Cook and some of my colleagues pointed out is like, look, if you do this, every paranoid, angry person who feels excluded from the system and is angry about elites will actually have a strong argument to make. That they voted Donald Trump into office and the elites, I'm making air quotes as I said, wouldn't let him do that. And that this was a coup, that this was a de facto seizure of power. Never mind the fact that we would get Mike Pence, and I think we'd get probably the best of the Trump presidency with a little more stability and manners and no Twitter outbursts. I think if you're going to remove the president, you've got to have an ironclad, watertight, impeccable case, because this is a really huge deal that we have never actually done in our history. Nixon resigned rather than go through the process of impeachment. I don't think there's a case here. Doesn't mean the case won't be here someday. I think if you lay everything out, the argument, if you fired Comey solely to get rid of an investigation into Flynn, then it does start approaching the area of obstruction of justice. Although everything once again would be held by the House and by the Senate. And the Republicans in the House and Senate are not going to be eager to remove a Republican president. So, folks, you're not there yet, and I don't think Ross does anybody any favors by bringing this up this early, because it makes it look like people were looking for any old excuse to impeach him, and that's not how the system works. So I would prefer if impeachment was considered way down the road, if ever, and with indisputable evidence that a crime has been committed, and not merely we just don't like the way he's making his decisions.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a reaction to a lot of hyperbolic reporting right now. But as you said, we'll find out how much meat there is to this investigation, and people who just never liked Trump in the first place. And so they're stunned. They're shocked, Jim, that he's acting as president kind of the way he did during the campaign.
Paraphrase what they said about Goldwater. My God, he's going to run as Trump. My God, he's going to govern as Trump. Yeah, that's who he was. That's who he is.
All right. As we exit here, we need to point out, and I'm sure many of our listeners already know, that we got the surprising news this morning that Roger Ailes has died at the age of 77. Roger Ailes was in show business for over 50 years, probably. He was with the Mike Douglas Show for a long time. He was affiliated with Rush Limbaugh for several years. And, of course, since 1996, he was the founding chairman and CEO of the Fox News Channel until he was forced out last summer in reaction to the major sexual harassment scandals involving Gretchen Carlson, and then other names have popped up since then. And Fox News is still dealing with the long-term effects of that. And so, Jim, his death today, as you have pointed out, has led to the typical avalanche of awfulness on Twitter, particularly on the left. I think I don't really quote Bill Clinton very often, but I remember him saying at Richard Nixon's funeral, if you're going to remember him for everything. And he should not be excused for what apparently took place at Fox News and other places along his career. But at the same time, he was a very talented political and media figure who changed the landscape in a lot of ways. And it's debatable, but a lot of people think conservatism and republicanism is better or stronger as a result of it.
Yeah, I think indisputably one of the most influential figures in media in the last 30, 40, maybe even 50 years. And you might argue the most influential figure, the person who has had the biggest impact in shaping what the media has become today. Look, the allegations against him are appalling. They turn your stomach and really can't be airbrushed out of the picture. On the other hand, it is not spiritually healthy to watch people dancing on his grave and talking about how happy they are that he's dead. A man has died. His family is in mourning. His friends and colleagues are in mourning. And the right thing to do in a circumstance like this is to wish them all well. Time will come, and I don't think that time is that far away, for a fuller assessment of the Roger Ailes legacy, the good and the bad, the triumphs and the sins. And that time will come not too far from now. But for now, let everybody mourn in peace. Let him let the body get cold. Let him get in the ground, and then we can talk about this. And my suspicion is we'll be talking about the legacy of Roger Ailes for a very long time. But for now, for everybody over at Fox News and everybody who worked with him, my sympathies. And it is an unparalleled legacy. That much can certainly be said.
Roger Ailes dead at 77. As we record this, just being reported that apparently he suffered a fall and slipped into a coma before his death, either last night or early this morning. So on that note, we will say goodbye for Thursday. Jim, talk to you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. And don't forget our friends at ZipRecruiter. You should have that tab open right now, by now anyway. So listeners to 3 Martini Lunch can post their jobs on ZipRecruiter for free. ZipRecruiter.com/free trial. And join us on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.
Panera now delivers, so you can order good, clean food right to your office, or door, or porch, or backyard, or front yard, or apartment, or dorm, or castle, or shop, or worksite, or wherever. For lunch, dinner, and everywhere in between. Click the banner to order or visit PaneraBread.com. Participating locations only. Panera. Food as it should be. Panera now delivers, so you can order good, clean food right to your office, or door, or porch, or backyard, or front yard, or apartment, or dorm, or castle, or shop, or worksite, or wherever. For lunch, dinner, and everywhere in between. Click the banner to order or visit PaneraBread.com. Participating locations only. Panera. Food as it should be.